A very good morning to all of you. As we are all aware, the Election Commission of India has consistently striven to ensure that our people elect their governments in a process that is absolutely clean and impartial. Continuous efforts have been made towards this end, and this has been through a process of streamlining procedures and rules, making them more specific and workable, and also plugging any kinds of loopholes that may arise with time. Innovative practices have also been introduced in many instances, and these again have gone a long way in firming up our people's belief in the democratic tradition. During the assembly elections held in Madhya Pradesh in November 2008, we had to ensure that every eligible voter, and I would like to repeat this, eligible voter, was able to cast his vote without any fear or prejudice. Now, this is easier said than done. An absolutely conducive atmosphere has to exist on the day of poll if this goal has to be achieved. Madhya Pradesh, which has a land area of more than 300,000 square kilometers, 230 assembly constituencies, 50 districts, and more than 47,000 polling booths. This is a tall order by any reckoning. All these things required an alert and sensitive administrative machinery, but more than that, a mechanism that would allow this to happen. For this, we first identified the major areas of concern that are there on the day of poll. The importance of the mock poll with which the process starts on the day of poll cannot be understated. So we have the mock poll, followed by the commencement of poll, any violations of the model code of conduct during the day, law and order issues, redressal of complaints, very important, obstruction to the poll process due to technical reasons, and by these I mean basically and mainly those issues related to the electronic voting machines. Any other significant matters during the poll, including the statistical informations that have to be provided on that particular day and which are very relevant, as also departure of the polling parties after the poll. Now, as we all know, the last hour of the closure of poll is a very vulnerable period, and we have to make sure that if there are any people standing in queues, even at the time of the closure of poll, they are taken care of as to what conditions have allowed that to happen, and ultimately that all polling parties come back very safely along with all the polling materials and the electronic voting machines to their respective stations. Many of these issues of concern are time bound. For example, the mock poll or the commencement of poll. But many of them, as you can see, are also those where time is of great essence. For example, law and order issues, complaint redressal, all of these have to be looked into if we do not want the poll process to get vitiated, as it is so. Timely information leads to a timely response, and that is a very, very major factor in any election, the very nature of an election being so. As such, we have to ensure and see that information is received on any of these issues of concern on time. For all these areas of concern that I have just mentioned, the normal communication channels have always been used. The difference that can be made, or the mantra as I would put it, is to put in place a mechanism which is practical, which is systematized, which works, and which is planned. A communication strategy that would enable us to obtain as well as provide information, where each member of our election team is able to obtain and provide the information, where each member of the team has a clear and unambiguous knowledge beforehand of what information needs to be provided, whom is it to be provided to, and how is it to be provided. Also, where each member of our election team is able to do so. And by each member of our election team, I would like to mean every person involved in the election process, right from the government official at the polling station level, to the zonal officers, to the sector magistrates, to those in the police stations taking care of law and order, to the returning officer, to the district election officer, and to the chief electoral officer of the state, and in fact the Election Commission of India in New Delhi also. Because each of these levels has to be in a continuous contact with each other so as to obtain the information and take the necessary steps that are required for this. All modern means of communication that were available to us were utilized for this, whether it be the mobile phones or the landline phones or the wireless system, as also the not so modern. We used runners. Now, runners were government officials whom we engaged in areas where there was a shadow area. That means the mobile network did not work, or where the nearest landline telephone from the polling station was not too close, or where the wireless station was the only means of communication with that particular polling booth, and which was also away. So basically, any polling station where the means of communication were not possible, and where between that and the nearest center where a mobile, landline or wireless set existed, or a police station, we had the services of a person whom we called a runner. He could use a cycle or a motorcycle, and who rushed from the polling station to that particular communication center to provide or give the information. And this, I must tell you, was an extremely practical kind of a thing which we ultimately discovered and which really worked. Now, how did this communication system work? How was it planned? We had the names and telephone numbers of each person posted especially for this purpose at the polling station. Now, this gentleman could be any government officer. He could be a booth level officer, or in certain cases where the Election Commission of India permitted us to do so, even the presiding officer of the polling station. The presiding officer was taken up in areas where we were unable to find a local village level functionary who could serve as our contact. Then the name and telephone number of the nearest police station, the name and telephone number of the zonal officer, of the sector magistrates, the identification of the runner, and any other possible contact. Now, Any other possible contact could also be the residence of a local village level government functionary who had a telephone, or even certain government buildings which remain open on the day of poll, like the primary health center or a veterinary center and things to that effect. Now here, as you can see, we have this gentleman who is our contact at the polling booth. He, in this particular photograph, is relaying the results of the mock poll that was conducted just prior to the commencement of poll. The queue of people that you are standing, each with their epic cards, is of course here. And the second one shows the zonal officer who is receiving the call from the booth level officer. This was the format basically which was evolved, whereby we have the district name, the names of the assembly constituency and their number, the name of the polling station, the landline phone, STD, mobile number, wireless. I do not need to repeat, you can see each one of them in this format. This particular format, because it's been picked up from the CEO's office, does not have the name of the BLO. Now here I have a district level plan prepared by the district election officer, the collector. This is from Vidisha district, for example. Here, as you would see, along with the mobile number of the person who was stationed at the polling booth, the names of these persons have also been given. So every district, every RO also had the name of the person. Now this was done to ensure that we have a particular reliable identified person at each polling station. There could be no confusion about the persons identified, the persons who had to be present at any of the levels. So we have the name and the telephone number. The second part, this has come in the second slide, are the those of the zonal officers, the sector magistrates and the runner. Now similarly, to receive and give information to the field level officers, that is the BLOs, the person at the polling station, zonal officers and the sector magistrates, we had communication teams placed in the offices of the returning officer. This was an assembly constituency where the ROs were not the collectors. It can be modified suitably if it's a parliamentary election or depending upon the local nature of work. So the RO, the district election officer or the collector, and the chief electoral officer. As you can see in this particular photograph, this is the team that was organized in the office of the chief electoral officer, each one of whom was given a particular number of districts from which he had to obtain this information. For example, we have 50 districts and we had put in 10 people in charge of 5 districts each along with 3 reserves. The next photograph, here it shows a communication team at the office of the district election officer. This is from the district of Betul. Now he was in contact, these people were in contact with all their ROs depending upon the number of constituencies that are there. Similarly, the ROs were in contact with their zonal officers as well as the polling booth officers. The number of polling booth contact persons and the zonal officers to whom each of these people was attached to depended upon the number, the strength, etc. in that district. Now these communication teams at the district level or the RO level, these were compiled in this particular format. This is a format for the district election officer. There was a similar format for the RO. All these details were uploaded by creating a web page which was created for us by the NIC. These are basically the methodologies by which we use MS Access, and so these are the details by which we put up our website on the NIC. Locally, I think every state Every district can do it as per their own parameters. A username and password was created so that only those who were authorized to access it could open it. And this was the methodology which was adopted in each of the CO, DO and the RO offices, whereby you could, at the mere click of the mouse, get the entire information as to who are the persons down our line who were in charge of each polling station, each RO level, DO level, etc. This is the format that appeared on the screen when we created the website. And from this, at any of the levels, whether it was in my office, the Chief Electoral Officer's office, or the District Collector or the RO, they could get the name and telephone numbers of the nearest contact or the contact at the polling station, whom they could ring up and find out immediately as to what was the position at that particular polling booth or an area. In case of any law and order situation, information could immediately be accessed or directions given, or if there was an incident that occurred at that particular station, that could be reported back to us. So this website enabled us to be in instant touch with all our offices down the line. For example, I'll give you an instance. In a particular district, there was a stabbing of a presiding officer, and one got to know of it immediately because the information came straight from the polling booth upwards, right up to my office, right up to me at the CO level, and I could immediately communicate it to the Election Commission of India. And mind you, the members of the Election Commission rang up by opening this NIC web page which we had created, the particular polling booth in that particular district, and they found out that the person had been taken care of, it was a minor injury and he'd been hospitalized. So they knew that nothing really was going very, very awry in that particular area. So this particular slide now gives you the methodology which I have just been explaining as to how did we work this communication plan through this infrastructure that was created. Each person at the polling station, for example, the mock poll for which the timing was fixed, he relayed it through a zonal officer to the RO gave it to the DO's office gave it to my office. Similarly, for law and order kinds of situations, any person at the polling station level could ring up at any of the appropriate levels, or from our levels we could ring up the polling station to find out as to what is the kind of a situation. Now this entire creation also has some financial implications, but fortunately not severe at all. We got a fixed amount sanctioned by the state government. As far as mobile phones are concerned, almost everyone was in possession of a mobile phone, and we generally tried to insist that every person who was deputed on poll duty had a mobile set of his own. But for the calls that he had to make, now we could not check as to how many calls did he make or of what duration. So we had fixed amounts sanctioned for each member of the communication team, right down from the person at the polling station level or the runner to our level at the district election office as reimbursement for the telephone and mobile calls. The net result of this communication plan, I am very glad to tell you, was extremely satisfactory. The mock poll exercise, which was conducted half an hour before the commencement of poll, we could compile the entire information and provide it to the Election Commission of India, New Delhi, within 1 hour of the commencement of poll, which was the deadline given by the Commission to us that we must get this information at that scheduled hour. On the day of poll, all complaints that were received could be immediately redressed. I personally got several telephone calls from several political functionaries, and I could respond to their concerns or worries or issues almost immediately by telling them as to whether they were correct or whether they were not. And by and large, almost all of them were found to be false. In one particular instance, I got a very angry call from a general secretary of a political party who told me that his candidate, who was there in some particular jeep on the day of poll, he had been detained by the police and was being taken to a lockup. The place that he had mentioned, I immediately rang up the polling station officer. My NIC web page was open. I could locate the telephone number of this gentleman out there. I asked him. He said, "No, sir, I just saw him 5 minutes ago. He was moving across this polling station." Not satisfied with that, I could talk to the zonal officer. He got back to me in 10 minutes by saying that he has located that guy and he's been moving around merrily. There's nothing about anything. The only thing was that we, the police and the administration, are keeping a watch on him so that he does not indulge in any malpractice. I immediately rang up this general secretary of the political party and told him his man is moving around scot-free. There's nothing in his complaint whatsoever. And believe me, after the first 3-4 hours of polling, the number of such telephone calls that I received went down so drastically, because I presume that almost every political party, because they had all rung me up on some issue or the other in the morning, they got to know that they cannot make false complaints or they cannot talk through their hat to me, because I could get in touch and let them know absolutely the factual position that existed in the field. In fact, after around 12 or so, I barely got any telephone calls, and the reactions, the responses that I got from my district election officers as well as the ROs was roughly the same. Immediate response to law and order issues. The fact that these elections were conducted relatively is a very soft term, because we hardly had any instances of violations of code of conduct or in a real sense any law and order issues during the elections. And that was again basically because everybody knew that we were not only keeping a watch in the field on them, but there was this communication system which was working very fast. In fact, I can give you another instance where Sahara TV was playing a clip about some law and order issue where some Dalits were being prevented from casting their vote. Prior to that, the information had come to the district election officer. I immediately rang up the collector concerned. He said, "We had the information because it was reported to us from the field, and in fact my SP is out there." I asked my PRO to ring up the channel, and they confirmed that they were showing the clip which was taken a short while ago, but they also were now in the knowledge that the SP along with his force had immediately taken care of the situation. EVM replacements, the electronic voting machine. Very often, I'm very sure in every election we get these kinds of instances where the EVM malfunctions or our presiding officer makes it malfunction. Timely receipt of statistical inputs. Again, something very important from our point of view, which we can obtain from this. And as I just mentioned a short while ago, the Election Commission of India also out there in New Delhi, and they did make several telephone calls in Madhya Pradesh on the day of poll as well as the day prior to the poll. They revealed it to us later on, just to check as to whether this plan was working or not. They made these calls and they got 100% answers from all people involved in this entire exercise. We utilized this communication plan also on the day of counting to obtain the results from the various counting centers. We use the media not for any other purpose, but to convey it to our entire machinery down the line. As we are all aware, we issue circulars, we give directions, but for that person in the village or at the fag end of our hierarchy, for example, in this case, for these 47,000 polling booths, the person out there at the polling station, for him to have it in his mind that a communication plan has been made and people would be contacting him, he would be expected to get back to us. Not the details, because the common public or the common man was not authorized, he cannot be, to get onto this website, but to ensure that we are going to track every event. This matter was also publicized through the media so that he in the village could read it, and even though the trainings had been given, the instructions had been given, he has it in his mind that he has to be a part of a quick and timely communication plan. We had also formed SMS and email groups with the collectors. This was contingency planning. Of course, this facility was used earlier for various other purposes, which is not the subject of discussion here today. But we maintained this also so that in case there was some problem with the communication network, then we could also obtain the information on the SMS or the email, and formation of these groups ensures that one person sends it and everyone gets it simultaneously. But a lot of care has to be taken. In fact, several issues are really important while we are planning this communication plan, because as I mentioned earlier, a communication plan has to be precise and very systematic and thorough and workable. There are lots of things about which we also have to be very careful. Jamming of lines. Our first worry was that so many people utilizing the network on that particular day. As it is, on any election day, you have all the politicians on the network, you have the press, the media on the network, plus the usual, the common public. They are using their mobiles and landlines. Added to that, we would have so many, almost 50,000 of our own people talking on the network. So a jamming of lines had to be avoided at all costs. This was hammered into the heads of all our team members down to the polling station level. We gave precise questions that would be asked or put, and absolutely precise and crisp answers that had to be given. None of these people were supposed to relate long, glamorous prose kinds of commentaries on the kind of a situation or the mock poll or whatever. If it was the mock poll, they merely had to say, so many polling agents, these parties represented. Switch off the line. At every stage, this was constantly reminded that jamming of lines should not take place, and that was only possible if the questions and answers were all short and crisp. Awareness of the shadow areas. A lot of states, I believe, are much ahead of Madhya Pradesh in as far as the communication network goes. But in Madhya Pradesh, we have hills, we have forests, we have remote tribal areas. So we had an entire information backup as to what are these shadow areas, so that for those particular areas, landlines or wireless sets or runners could be used. Mobile and telephone authorities, all all people in this communication network, they had to be taken into confidence so that there was no breakdown at any level on that day. And very important, adequate number of rehearsals are a must if this plan is to work. We conducted 3 mock rehearsals prior to the day of poll, and these rehearsals included the person at the polling station level, at the zonal officer, sector magistrate, thana, police station, up to our levels. This is extremely important because we have to know whether at that particular polling station the mobile phone works or not, the landline phone works or not, the wireless that has been put by the police, that is not outdated or an ancient contraption that they have put there which does not work. So, adequate number of rehearsals including every person in this plan from the place from where he is supposed to communicate to us has to be there. God is great, it all worked well, but we must take care of all these exigencies. We constantly make use of our communication network, but I think in an election, if we really put a thought to this, do a detailed exercise, put it into the heads of all our election team members, right down from the lowest to the highest, I am very sure this plan works. And with this plan, not only are we able to provide all the information that is required otherwise in an election, but to have a peaceful and fair and free election, I think for every kind of a response, since we get the information on time, we are also able to give the directions or quell it in time, and that could be done with this. Thank you so much.
Questions about the runner, you said that it was an official. I thought that when you said that he should be a neutral and reliable person, then you could take non-officials also. But apparently it appears you mentioned specifically that he was an official.
So I think this kind of a situation would depend and vary from state to state. But more so what we felt was that I think it's a very subjective matter to call somebody neutral or impartial. And a government servant, although a lot of us can have doubts on individuals' frame of mind, but by and large we believe that they behave in a more impartial fashion than the others. So it's more of a risk taking someone who's not in the government for this purpose. So we did not.
Secondly, about this updation, you had a web-based system, but then the location of the polling personnel to the respective polling stations may be known only 2-3 days before. So you were able to, maybe you would have got their phone numbers earlier itself while preparing the database of the polling personnel and then update. So, and apparently all the officials concerned had access through internet and they were able to make use of the numbers.
Sir.
That is why it was possible
Sir.
to
This particular slide mentions the report options on these points were also provided for the districts. So as soon as the randomization etc. took place, they put it on this and we got it automatically. We did not have to get this information and then feed it onto our system.
No, in the sense that for a polling station, the exact official to be allotted would have been known only 2-3 days before.
That would be the case for the presiding officer, sir, wherever we use the presiding officer. In fact, there were 2 or 3 districts where they generally use the presiding officers because they did not have other government village level functionaries whom they could use. But any other person, any other village level functionary who was there, we had his name and the telephone number.
The other issue is about jamming. Jamming may not have taken place at the lowest levels. At the higher the level, like CO's level, you would be getting calls from various politicians or officials also. But at the micro level, the jamming may not have been that much, I suppose.
So fortunately, the jamming did not take place at all. I of course had taken another telephone connection in my office, because it was not possible for every person at the polling station level to know my telephone number. So I would just ring up. In fact, they were told that they had to pick up any telephone number, but not dial any telephone number to their wives or children or whatsoever. So I had taken a dedicated line. Any of these things coming, I rang up from that number to the polling station or the zonal officer or whatever it is.
So was there any report or feeling or suspicion that some set of officials did not really or may misuse this facility to convey information to wrong quarters on the happenings?
No, we did not get it. Nobody reported anything. These things were made very clear during the training sessions, and from the results it appears that probably by and large, one cannot say for sure, but nobody did.
The situations may vary from state to state.
Sir.
I don't know.
In fact, we were very worried that they may also ring up their household and find out about the halchal, or those people would want to know as to what is the kind of polling percentage that is on.